Hello, everyone. My name is Shara Davis. I'm a freshman here at Calvin College, and I'm studying biochemistry. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Rick Burnette. Rick serves as the Director of Agriculture of ECHO International, where his team oversees technical questions from agriculture and community development workers around the world. Rick and his family were appointed to be missionaries to Thailand in 1994. Based near the Thai and Myanmar border, they established and directed the Upland Holistic Development Project for 14 years, assisting tribe communities with sustainable agriculture. In 2009, the Burnettes established and directed ECHO's first regional impact center in Chiang Mai, Thailand, where they provided technical assistance for ECHO's regional network. Since 2013, Rick has served as ECHO's International's Director of Agriculture in Fort Myers, Florida. And it is my pleasure to welcome Rick Burnette to the stage.
Shira. Hi, can you hear me? All right, I'm going to take it back to the first one there. So it's so wonderful to be here. I began to collaborate with Calvin people, well over 10 years ago. When I was in Chiang Mai, Thailand, I was an instructor with the International Sustainable Development Studies Institute, and we had Calvin people coming through, and I was so impressed with them. And then later, with my involvement with ECHO, we had quite a few Calvin interns who have been coming through, and in development work in Asia and other places, I also was able to work with people who have come through this institution. So thank you so much for this opportunity. So yes, we did work in Thailand, and this talk will kind of focus on our involvement with work on the Thai-Burma border, and I think you saw this picture, and that's not us. This is us 10 years ago, and you can tell that's not us because we don't have beards like those guys or really great hats, and also they're Lutherans and we were Baptists. So anyway, that was my family, I think around 2006, and the guy in the dark on the end, Jesse, he's like almost 27, and he's about to have his first baby on Monday. And the little guy there is way taller than me now. He's a senior in high school, and the guy in green, he's about to finish up college. And Ellen and I, we look exactly the same as we did. And so we arrived there in 1994 and had so much to learn. And we were a bit overwhelmed as we learned Thai and we started to locate our focus communities and begin to study with them. And as we did needs assessments, you can see this big, long list of needs that they communicated to us. And I'm an agriculturalist. I had a little bit of experience in the Philippines in the 80s, and then hoped to do a lot of what I did in the Philippines and Thailand, and I found that the situation on the Thai-Burma border with these migrants from Myanmar, from Burma, was very different. And you can see one of the issues was lack of legal residence. They were migrants. They had no documentation. They had no citizenship. And what are we supposed to do about that? And I could deal with land degradation, but and then water and sanitation I wasn't so sure about, and opium addiction. So there were just so many things. It was a bit overwhelming. And then in 1996, we received permission to start an NGO called the Upland Holistic Development Project. It was under a local Baptist foundation. And again, we faced some major obstacles because this was a new project. It had no track record, and it was only my wife and I. We had no local staff, and we had no place. I mean, we're working with people with very limited land, and we didn't want to go in there and mess up what they had. We felt like we needed kind of a research station, and we didn't know what that was going to do. And then there was our Christian identity would understandably lead concerns about us coming in and proselytizing. And so anyway, in this talk, I think that you would be it'd be okay for you to assume that, you'd hear from me that despite these challenges, we pulled together the fortitude and the hope to overcome these things, but that's not how it's going to work. My coworkers think I'm this guy. And, I'm a little bit Mr. Worst Case Scenario. I'm more like that kid there in the front on the end. I mean, I'm literally like that on roller coasters, and I guarantee you, as soon as I leave this building, I'm going to slip on some slush and break my hip. And that's a little bit like me, but despite all that, I do have hope. I do have some experience with hope. And so I just want to let you know that I'm not one of those motivational speakers. I guess I'm partially demotivational right now. Sorry, they're like, why did we invite him? But I like this quote from Jim Wallace. And first of all, I'm not very touchy-feely. I mean, I don't really ride on emotions a whole lot. And I like the fact that he says that it's not a feeling, and it's a decision. And the fact that it is a vocation. And that is essentially what I learned over there. So my talk is over. Thanks for coming. Hope is our job. And for me, for someone who might be prone to go to the dark place when faced with some challenges, it is a divine source of hope that is so important. And that's what we have to use as a foundation. And now I'm not a theologian, I'm an agriculturalist, and I'm not a linguist, and so words are hard for me. And so I keep kind of mixing up hope and inspiration, because I'm kind of like, well, in this hope talk, I'm going to keep saying, well, we found inspiration here, and we found inspiration there, and then I go back and I think, well, does that mean we found hope, or they found hope? And so I kind of thought it was a little bit of a chicken and egg thing, and then there's all these other positive terms, which are all good, like optimism and motivation and enthusiasm. They're all in there, mixed in there somehow. And we'll wrangle with that a little bit. How many of you are community development majors, or how many of you have seen this sort of thing? This is called a logical framework. So I'm guessing about 1/3 of you have been around the log frame. And I don't know, I may be showing my age and development. This might be something that's just completely out of style now. But a bunch of Swedes taught me how to use this in the early 2000s. If we were going to get the money from Stockholm, they said we needed to do the log frame, and so we did it. And I'm very grateful that we did, because this helped to organize our approach towards those felt needs that we talked about. We were able to systemize everything, and we could understand, okay, what is our objective here? What are our goals? And what is it going to take in order to meet those things? What sort of inputs will be needed, and what kind of outputs? What kind of budget would be required, and what kind of time, and how many meetings, and how many hoe handles will we have to buy? It's all those things. But nowhere in that logical framework is there anything about hope. And so now in hindsight, I do realize that a big source of input, a big critical factor in this development work is hope. And I made this little cyclical thing. I like to do that in my office sometimes. And I think there's a little bit of reality to it. But anyway, I found, as I look back over the 20 years, that hope is critical because, well, it does lead towards inspired planning and action. And hopefully, if those things are inspired and are done well, and the stars align and things turn out quite right, we'll have some positive results that we can document, that we can report, that we can share, that we can celebrate and share with others and hopefully inspire. So you see where we're going. So there's a cyclical cycle of progress that does include hope. And Brian, my colleague, gave a very good talk on positive deviance. How many of you have heard that term before? There's the bad deviance, and then there's the positive deviance. So the positive deviance, in my definition, Brian, you can correct me on Monday, would be the farmers, or it could be positive deviant communities, or it could be a project that seems to be thriving quite well under very challenging circumstances. I believe that those folks do inspire hope. And then there's appreciative inquiry, and that's something I wish that I had focused on more, because I think when I started work many years ago, I was a little bit more focused on the needs, the challenges, the weaknesses, and not recognizing early enough that there's good stuff that can be drawn upon and should have been recognized a long time ago. And then there's people that we discover in the process that come from the outside as well. These could be resource persons, these could be advocates, and their involvement can inspire hope. And then you've got the local motivators. They might be religious leaders. They may be just people with the knack to lead in the community in a very positive way. And we need to be looking for those guys and planning for them in our development plans. And one other thing, and I wish we'd have done that as well, with a timeline. What were some circumstances that you guys overcame? What have we overcome together that can also inspire hope? And then another thing in your development class is that stakeholder analysis deal, you know who stakeholders are. And so this is I based this off of an old stakeholder analysis I did many years ago. So you got the primary stakeholders, those would be the focus communities. And then the secondary ones would be like the development agency or local government entities or local businesses, etc. And so in a stakeholder analysis, you're trying to determine, to forecast, make an assumption about what will the impact be on these people. So hopefully when our project is all finished, these 18 communities are going to feel pretty good about things. It's going to have been a positive effect. And for the secondary ones, as a development agency, hopefully it ends well for us. But for some, it may not end so well. And so when we were working, we realized that like local plantation owners did not like what we were doing. They said, you're going to make these people not want to work for so less, for pennies for rice if you continue. They were almost threatening. And sometimes, and usually the government officials were good, but every now and then we would come across one that for some reason was not happy about our involvement. And if it's a food security project, the food peddlers wouldn't be very happy if the households have more food security and self-sufficiency. So, you know this guy? It's not angry Jesus. I showed it, Brian, I showed it to Renee yesterday, and she said, why is Jesus angry? I went, Renee, that is not Jesus, that's Sanballat. And so in case you're not familiar with Sanballat, from Sunday school, he was the nemesis for Nehemiah in the book of Nehemiah. So Nehemiah went to Jerusalem to repair the walls of his city that had been in ruin, and he found a lot of stakeholders were very, very happy to join in and help fix those walls. I think they fixed it in just an incredible amount of time, like 52 days. And Sanballat and his guys were like, hey, you guys will never do this. If a fox runs up the wall, it'll fall down and stuff like that. He was not nice. This is a picture of him. And so when we're working, we're going to meet. When we're working, we're going to meet those Sanballats. And I guess we just have to expect that. And in some ways, that's okay. Because another person, I'm quoting on hope, Brene Brown, says that hope is a function of strength. And she also says it's not an emotion, so I guess I'm leaning towards those non-emotional types. But she says it's cognitive. She says it's a behavioral process. You know, it's something that arises out of adversity. And we're going to meet adversity. See, that's the negative part of me, Mr. Worst Case Scenario, coming out again. So, okay, I'm going to remind you again, this is what we were dealing with. This is what we were facing. The people in the communities and what we were somehow going to try to be of assistance with. And so in 1996, in 97, when the project finally got rolling, we had 4 staff, local staff, and we were working in only 9 Palong communities on the Thai-Burma border. And these are people who had migrated from Burma to get away from the civil unrest. They came into Thailand. There was very little for them in the way of natural resources, in the way of land. Again, they had no documentation and citizenship. But over the last 20 years, UHDP has grown, so there's now 14 members of the team, and they work in 34 communities. So they've gone from a focus area of a few thousand residents to over 10,000. I left UHDP in 2009 to start working with ECHO, and so now UHDP, and since 2009, UHDP has worked in partnership with Plant with Purpose. Is Christy here? I saw her picture up somewhere. Anyway, you'll see her tonight. UHDP is divided into two main programs. We basically got a center, and we've also got what was more important was the community outreach. And you can see there what all happens at the center. It's a place for occasional meetings, although most meetings and trainings take place in the communities. It was a place for field trials, variety trials. Research could take place before we messed with the resources of the community. We were able to propagate plants and piglets and various things. And it's become a destination. Quite a few people come to visit for learning, and it's also the location of ECHO's Asia Seed Bank. And out in the community, UHDP Extension includes several activities based upon the felt needs that you saw. So sustainable upland farming, which relates to soil conservation, soil improvement, crop diversification, that also links in with agroforestry. There's backyard farming, which includes animals like pigs, chickens, and home gardens. UHDP has dabbled with appropriate technology. They wouldn't consider it their strength, but it is something they have worked with. One major area is to help communities to facilitate community strategy development. And there's also been water and sanitation, women's programs, documentation, and citizenship. In addition, because there are concerns with land tenure, these people moved into areas that are national parks. There's been mapping with GPS and GIS, working towards land tenure, land reform, and also conservation of natural resources. So kind of typical of a lot of projects you see around the world. And so Ellen and I went back in October for UHDP's 20th anniversary. We'd been away from Thailand for over 3 years. And it was great. It was great to see our team, great to see old partners and communities that we worked in. And I got some data. I mean, they have these village saving and loan groups, and although that's not their biggest strength, they've gained a lot of traction related to microfinance. With documentation and citizenship, this has grown into something really significant. Over 5,000 people have been helped. Thousands of people now have access to clean water and sanitation, and with home gardens, over 8,000 now have improved food security. And UHDP is a faith-based organization, is very involved with local network of churches. And it works in Buddhist communities as well as Christian communities. Agroforestry is really big, and so we work towards diversifying farms and working with things called non-timber forest species that produce non-timber forest products. And so that's kind of where UHDP has made its name. So being there and just reflecting over 20 years, it's been a good opportunity to ascertain what are the hope lessons. There are many kinds of lessons to be learned, and with this invitation to come to Calvin, it was a good chance to reflect on hope. And I realized there were about 7 very brief but pretty good stories that I could share related to hope in which UHDP has been involved. The first story is about the property that we found back in 1996 and started to develop in 1997. 1997 was an El Nino year. It was extremely dry. And we did not have any budget to start with. Like I said, we had no track record. We didn't have anything. And my cousin must have felt sorry for us, and he sent a few $100s, which we used to start renting about 15 acres of land that was hilly and appropriate for research and this whole small farm resource center deal. And the only thing that we knew to do was to set up some housing for a couple of young guys to come in and start helping us to develop the property. And so we took that money and we bought bamboo and thatch. That was what we could afford. And we piled it up. And I remember one day, as we were getting ready to start building these buildings, I saw a lot of smoke coming up from that area. And I thought, boy, that looks like it's close to the property. And the closer I got, I was like, that's really close to the property. And finally I got to the point where it's like, that's the property. So this was a March fire. And by the time I got there, I saw that the fire had run through the entire property, and I expected to find, and although this is only $300 worth of bamboo and thatch, but that's all we had, and I expected to find all that in ashes. When we got there, everything had burned except for that. And I know, I cannot offer you the real explanation, but in my heart, I took that as affirmation. I found that something that gave us hope, because this was a hard work. We were getting started, and our sending agency wasn't too excited about the idea of a small farm resource center. We weren't getting a lot of support from them, and I felt like this was one little thing that contributed towards some hope in continuing the work. And then right after that, we were working in communities, and at the top of their list was water, clean water. They'd have to go to springs that were down the hill and bring water up, and there was nothing nearby. And we found another organization that had skill in developing gravity-fed water systems. And after many, many, many weeks of planning, these guys got together and they dug a trench over a mile long, over a 2-day period, to install the pipe. And it brought all of us together. It was a blessing to me. I believe it was a blessing to them. It created this camaraderie in a sense that, yeah, we can keep working together. In fact, they came over to our center after that was done to help us build our own water system later. But that was another story where hope rose out of a felt need and out of cooperation. Okay, Brian, stop rolling your eyes, but this is my favorite plant of all, rattan. And rattan is a palm. It's a viney palm with wicked thorns, and that's where you get wicker. Now, over there, they're not making wicker chairs for their houses. They use it to make baskets, traditional baskets. You can eat the heart of the palm. In fact, at ECHO, I had some just the other day. The heart guys help eat it. And it's also the reason that the Palong were really, really interested in it. You see those belts that those ladies are wearing. It's a part of their tribal fashion. This is the essence of being a Palong woman, is wearing a rattan hoop. And when we were trying to kickstart the agroforestry program in 1997, they said, we would really like to get some rattan. We got to go to Burma to get it, or we have to go so far back in the mountains. And so if we could do some project that involved rattan, that would be great. And by golly, we were determined to find rattan, and we went everywhere we could to find rattan palms and pick rattan fruit and find rattan seedlings. And they began growing it. We were propagated at our center. Within a few years, they were propagating it, but it brought us together. And I know it sounds silly, but it was around these seeds, it was around this plant that brought cohesion and a lot of hope. In fact, when we were developing this agroforestry concept, we kind of had our little lame demonstration started, but we thought it would be great if we could find someone that's actually doing this. It just seems like someone ought to be doing this because these non-timber forest species were disappearing due to the environmental degradation. And John Long, my coworker, said, I've heard of a man who lives way back in the mountains. And he heard that guy might be able to help us. And so it took like 2 years to figure out how to get there. And when we did, it was so fun. We had to take boats down the Goak River, and then we had to walk like an hour back up in the mountains. And we met this guy, Uncle T-Sat, in the middle, and he was eccentric and charismatic, and he's no angel either. But that guy knows how to do agroforestry, and we were like, by golly, we got to take people to see this. And so we went back, and we started actually bringing people up there by the boatloads. This guy was a positive deviant. He was a deviant in some ways, but he was a positive deviant in other ways. And we focused on the positive part. And I remember we were going back after taking a big group, and the lady there in the lower corner, she turned around, she was sitting in front of me in the boat, and she said, that was great, that was wonderful, but how can we do this because we don't have much land? And I was like, I didn't know what to say. And I said, well, just use what you got. And she said, she looked at me. I thought that was the most pithy, stupid reply I've ever made. And she went back and she used what she had. She had her backyard and she planted rattan and perennial vegetables. She made her own tables and she inspired others. So this positive deviant doer inspired her and she inspired others. And you know how that works. And then there's the advocates of hope. I mean, these guys were not listed as one of the official tribal groups of Thailand when we arrived. They were not recognized. They did not have rights. None of them were citizens. And I remember one of our Swedish partners came up and said, you guys need to deal with this. And I was like, well, we're just farmers. We're just agriculturalists. She said, I think you can do it. So she kind of kicked us in the pants. She said, we'll find you funding. Let's get this going. Within a few years, we had found key partners. These are lawyers from democracy groups and all kinds of helpful people who came together to be their advocates. And they built our capacity. Their capacity was built. And within about 4 years, citizenship was being granted. This picture in the very bottom is maybe 200 Palong who went down to Bangkok from the mountains back in November to pay homage to the late king of Thailand. And then here's my comfort zone, just seeing degraded land being renewed, seeing a regenesis out of sustainable upland farming and agroforestry. And there are hundreds of these patches. And my theory is if you get more and more of those patches, they're going to start running together. And then they're going to take over the world. That's my theory. And then these guys, who 20 years ago were kind of like, we don't really they would say stuff like that. They were very self-depreciating. They're like, we really don't have anything to offer here. They became the technicians. They became the professors. They were the positive deviants. We would lead people back there. And by golly, I can see 2 Calvin graduates in pictures right there. There's Jen and there's James. Anyway, you guys show up everywhere. But anyway, it's just been so wonderful in a generation to see the roles switch. And that is a source of hope. All right, I'm almost done. So y'all haven't heard a Wendell Berry quote yet, I understand? I know, I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. But he's cool. But I almost didn't quote him because I didn't like that quote at first. It bummed me out. And if you bum me out, it's got to be bad. Because he says, I can't give anybody hope. Hope has to come out of you. And I thought about that, and I thought, it's just a little bit too downer for this crowd. And these are impressionable young people. I can't do this. And then, I don't know, I put it on the back burner. And then I'm changing the subject. I'll get back to it. I was looking out my window, Brian, the other day, and I was really disgusted with my garden. I am so far behind. There are things that are drying up. There are things I've got to get seeded. There are things I have not harvested. There's just no time. And I was standing there looking at it thinking, why do I even bother? And then I thought, well, I can't help it. And I do like the papayas, and I like the collard greens and all those other things. But I also do it, and this sounds like I have a Messiah complex or something, but I do it because I want to encourage and inspire other people to do it. Because if I talk about gardening all the time and I don't do it, I don't really have a lot of weight to lend to this. So that's what I was about. Then it got me thinking. And I thought, okay, so my hope has come out of inspiration and encouragement in the past. And hopefully, I'm also going to be inspiring and encouraging others to garden or to do other good things and not so many bad things. And to me, in my little simplified way of thinking, hope inspires action. And then appropriate action is what would lead to positive change. And I think that's what Wendell Berry is basically saying. We cannot pour the hope into those heads and hearts ourselves. It has to come up from within. So I'm going to reiterate. Wherever we are, and as much as possible, in whatever way that we can, we should be trying to inspire and encourage others. And this in different ways. My thing is gardening. Your thing may be knitting, or it may be something bigger than that. And then these are seeds of hope. And I think Phil gave a talk on that, Phil Murphy, already, but I stole it from him. The seeds of hope, I believe, are nurtured by such inspiration and encouragement. Anyway, that's what I observed over 20 years. And again, hope leads to action, and we've got to have the action for any positive change. All right, and so here's just the list of things. This is your regular summary thing. You can read it. I'm not going to read through each one. And I'm going to leave the last slide. It's not touchy-feely. It's kind of like, get up and do it. And it's from Dorothy Day. And I like it a lot. Anyway, that's all I've got to share on hope, and I hope it's useful.